Cool. So the next thing we're going to talk about is to do with like police tactics. So these are things that police, or you might see police do at protests. They're not always guaranteed to do them, but this is quite a good list or good starting point of some tactics that we've seen them used in the past. It's also worth remembering that we never actually will know like how the police are going to react in any situation. Sometimes they might be, as it says here, the action might be completely peaceful, completely calm, not breaking any laws, but the police just might still react in sometimes a violent manner, sometimes that violent manner then becomes unlawful as well, or both. But yeah, that's just goes to say that we will never know how they will react. But yeah, it's just good to be prepared for the different ways that they might come down on a protest. So as we mentioned before, we're going to be talking about what they should do in situations. But what they should do and what they actually do in practice are two very different things. So the first tactic that we're going to be talking about is, it's not really a tactic, it's more of a role. But yeah, it's the role of this officer in the baby blue bib here. So often at protests and like demonstrations and stuff, we'll see officers like this going around. We've never been able to work out what she's handing out, but something. But yeah, walking around being really, really friendly to loads of people, trying to start conversations with everyone and just, yeah, trying to be friendly. The key thing to remember here is that they've undergone like different training, and their role is actually to be friendly, for the purposes of like getting information, finding more about where you've come from, who you've come with, what you've been doing recently, like what you've been planning, more about the protest, finding out about organizers or people deemed to be organizers there, and all that kind of stuff. So the key thing to remember when dealing with these officers is to kind of treat them as you would any other officer. So if we've said before that no comment is kind of what you should be saying if asked any questions, or similar, or the equivalent of no comment. And that's what we'd recommend doing with these officers. So if they come up to you and start asking you questions or just trying to be like really, really overtly friendly, what you can do in that situation is just say, oh, sorry, I've got to go and like take a phone call, or I just don't really want to talk, or you can just answer their questions with no comment. So there's a few different options of what you can do. But yeah, don't engage in conversation, don't engage in small talk. It's all kind of for the purposes of gathering information. They're also, I don't know if you can see them, but it's somewhere here. They've also got body worn footage, so they can be recording audio or like video. They're often not always recording like video because it comes up with a big flashing red circle, but we don't know when or when not they're recording audio. So anything you say to them could be recorded. The next tactic / role that we see often at protests, we'll see pretty much all the time at more recent protests, is this. So they'll normally have one or two officers. They go around in teams of two, with one of them filming, one of them kind of helping the other person film. Yeah, they go around protests filming like individuals, filming the crowd in general, like going up really close to people's faces, just trying to basically film everything that they can. And the officers, they're called evidence gathering officers, and it's kind of obvious why they might be called that. But yeah, so they go up to people and just film loads of stuff that happens at a protest. But the police don't have any more of a right to film in public than you do. And you don't have to comply with their filming. So if they start filming you, some things that you might do in that situation is just walk away. You don't have to look at the camera. If they ask you questions and they're filming like this, then probably best not to answer questions, because it's really obvious that you're being filmed. You don't have to say anything. You can walk away. You can put a mask on. You can, yeah, just look away basically. More recently, we've been seeing like the use of facial recognition, either in like cameras mounted on top of like a van. But but yeah, or sometimes we're not exactly sure of the extent of like police technology, but they might already have built in like facial recognition technology into some of these cameras. So yeah, again, the same kind of applies. You have to look at the camera. It's probably best not to. Just yeah, keep looking away and don't look into it. So yeah, that is these officers. This police tactic is one that we see not as often as like the recording or anything, but it does happen sometimes. So the tactic here, it's what we call a kettle. The police like to call it a containment, but it's all the same thing. They essentially surround a group of protesters like this, prevent people from coming in, prevent people from leaving. Sometimes they'll let people come in and then just not let them leave, but yeah, it's all at their discretion. So yeah, they'll kind of surround the people, prevent other people from coming in, prevent people from leaving. And what they often do then is once they've got a group of people inside, is they say, well, you need to give us your details to leave this area, to leave the kettle. And the thing is that often this is not true. So you don't have to give your details and you should answer their questions with no comment. What we've seen is in the past is people who go up to try and leave and they say, you have to give us your details. Sometimes people do end up giving their details, and that's fine. That's your decision to make. If you want to leave early or try and get out as early as possible, then that's obviously up to you. But what we have seen in the past is where everyone inside has collectively kind of refused to give their details. So they've all said, no, I don't want to give my details. And that might mean that they wait in there for longer. But what we've seen in the past is that eventually the police kind of just give up and let everyone go. It also depends on the context. So obviously here they've got like a massive boat in the middle. So it's unlikely that if people just went up to them and said, oh, I'm not giving you my details, that they'd ever be let go. They'll probably be arrested. But if it's just a group of people who've all said, I don't want to give my details, then what we've seen is that they often will release people altogether. There's also case law that kind of states that you're not supposed to be, like, your details aren't supposed to be demanded as a condition for your release. We can kind of share more details about that by email, but it's called the Mengesha case, in case anyone's interested. The other thing to be wary of, that there's actually no kind of defined limit of how long they can keep you in there, and there's no requirement in the law for them to provide you with food, water, like toilet access, or anything like that. So sometimes if you obviously feel like you'd want to leave that as soon as possible to avoid like not having any water for the next something hours, then that's obviously a decision for you to make. As mentioned earlier as well, we talked a bit about Section 50 of the Police Reform Act. And that also comes up in conjunction with kettles more than it does just alone. So often people will get kettled, and then sometimes the police will say, oh, we're using Section 50 to get your details. That applies if they believe that you have been engaging or are currently engaging in antisocial behaviour, and that is defined as behaviour that is likely to cause harassment, alarm, or distress. So in that situation, you might want to ask, like, what behaviour of mine do you deem to be like, or what behaviour of mine constitutes antisocial behaviour? And often they'll have like absolutely nothing to say in that moment. But yeah, that's kind of just worth remembering. And if you fail to give the details in that moment, though, and they actually do believe that you've been committing antisocial behaviour, or sometimes just because they want to, you can be arrested. So they will take you to the police station and you'll be arrested for not giving your details or failing to answer your details when they use Section 50 of the Police Reform Act. So that can happen. And sometimes we've seen in the past that people have then gone on to just go to the station, end up getting released with either no further action or being taken to court and then being found not guilty. But yeah, in that situation, it's up to you what you decide to do. You can either give your details or be taken to a station. And either way, it's best to get in touch with us so that we can support you after that, and in challenging the use of that power. Cool. So I will hand over to my colleague who will deal with the next bit.
Move the slide on, there we go, lovely. Can you see in the photo the two officers in the yellow bibs or jackets are holding some pieces of paper, which some of you who've been on protests before might have seen. It looks like these people are in a stationary position, so this is probably a section 14 of the Public Order Act. If they were on a march, it might be a section 12. If the police ever offer you a piece of paper, or you hear officers start to make an announcement or telling you about section 12 or section 14 of the Public Order Act, turn around, ignore them, walk away and start chanting with your friends. So these are sections that the police can use to set restrictions on protests. And then if people don't comply with the restrictions that the police have been put in place, they can be arrested and prosecuted for it, if the police can prove that they should have been aware of the conditions and still chose to break them. So this is something that changed in June 2022. The requirement used to be for the police to prove that you were made aware of the conditions. Now they have to show that you should have been aware of the conditions, presumably because they took enough steps that people in the place should reasonably have been able to know that information. We haven't seen in court yet what that will mean in practice, what a court will consider to mean that a person should have known, especially in a crowded and noisy environment. So the advice from us remains the same: don't see it, don't say it, don't hear it, don't talk about it. So if you know the TfL slogan, see it, say it, sorted. The thing to remember for section 12 and 14 is don't see it, don't say it, sorted. Okay, this is some riot police being rather aggressive. So we must remember that the role of the police is not to side with us. They often lie and are aggressive and intimidating towards protesters. The police are frequently more aggressive towards protesters belonging to marginal groups, particularly Black people and people of colour, as the police are known to be institutionally racist. There is no such thing as a friendly chat with a police officer, so always remember to answer questions with no comment. Okay, it's not very clear in this photo perhaps, but you can see that there's a group of protesters and then a line of police, and then further back there's a vehicle in the road. You can see another line of the police, and behind that there's another group of protesters. So the police have divided the demonstration or the action into two parts and separated the two groups of protesters. Police may use physical boundaries to split protesters up into much smaller groups, and they may then start to label some protesters as good and some as bad. This creates a sense of mistrust within the group and the wider activist community, and is used to promote the idea of self-policing. Okay, self-policing is where activists police themselves by not engaging with the bad protesters, and this leads to activists acting in a way that doesn't show solidarity with their fellow activists. Ignore the police when they start doing this. Remember to stick together and support each other.